Aloha. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica. I'm a librarian with the Hawaii State Public Library System, and I want to thank you all for joining us today for our virtual author talk. Our guest today is Agnes Terao-Guiala, author of Hawaiian Women's Fashions, Kapa, Cotton, and Silk. Her book is available in the HSPLS catalog, which can be accessed at librarieshawaii.org. If you want to learn more about Agnes and her book, you can find more information by searching for Hawaiian Women's Fashions in Facebook. This presentation is sponsored by the Friends of the Library of Hawaii and the 2020 Summer Reading sponsors. We will begin with asking Agnes questions, and you can ask questions in the comment box. We will get to your questions towards the end of our program. And with that, I would like to welcome Agnes from her home. Good morning, Agnes.
Good morning. Aloha.
Aloha. It's so wonderful to see you. Thank you so much
Thank
for being a
you
part of this author talk. I
for
wish we could
inviting
do
me.
it in person. Then there wouldn't be any technical difficulties or distance, but I feel really close to you because Agnes was my favorite teacher at Maui High School, my English 12th grade teacher. And when I found out that your book was being published, it was actually from Kitra Arcus, who is now a librarian also. And she shared that it was published, and I thought, oh my gosh, that's so exciting. So I just wanted to ask you, first of all, what was the inspiration behind writing this book?
Well, when I was growing up in Paukukalo, which is near the near Waihe'e and Wai'ehu, my parents were too poor to afford a piano, and my neighbor was taking piano lessons, and I begged and begged, and my mother thought, well, we should do something for Agnes. So I got signed up for Auntie Emma Sharp's hula class. And I was 4 and I thought it was just the bomb. I really enjoyed dancing hula. And one day after class, the teenage dancers showed up with their holokus. I think they were doing some kind of show, and they all had the holokus of the different islands. And Auntie Emma was admiring them and looking through them. And all of us little keiki hula dancers stood in the doorway and gawked and drooled and ranted and raved about how beautiful those shiny satin holokus were. And at that moment, I fell in love with the holoku. Fast forward years later, I always wondered why or how the holoku became associated with Hawaiian women's fashion. And that inspired me to start researching for the book.
Wonderful. And I got to get a copy myself, and I looked through it, and it's such a, from a librarian's perspective, it's like a reference tool. You can see the passion that you have behind, the origins of the book, and it's just exquisite. And in a little bit, we'll show everyone some beautiful photographs from the book. But I wanted to ask you also, what were the most challenging and conversely easiest things about writing this book? Was there anything that just flowed and was easy for you? And what were the challenges in creating this book?
Well, I should start with the challenges, I think. I was doing research and I wanted to do justice to the Hawaiians because the holoku actually became the traditional Hawaiian garment after the pa'u. And I did a lot of, as much research as I could on Maui. I did a lot of research, believe me, and it was before the time of laptop computers. So I think I spent between 18 and 20 years doing the research. And I even ended up at UH. I was not a student, so I couldn't borrow any books. So I stayed in the St. Francis convent, which is no longer in existence, and would go every day to the libraries at UH and do research and catch the bus to Bishop Museum. And I spent a whole summer doing that. And I really wanted to represent the Holoku and the history of Hawaii well. The most fun thing was asking all my students friends,
Mhm.
faculty and staff from Maui High and Baldwin and hula sisters to serve as models for the holokus and mu'umu'us. Some of them modeled their own, and some of them modeled garments from my collection. I started to buy holokus and mu'umu'us as soon as I started doing the book, and I think I have about 200 of them. And my husband said, "The book's over. Get rid of those clothes." And I'm kind of thinking maybe we should have a sale because lots of people tell me I can't find those kinds of garments.
Mm.
And they've become, vintage now.
Mhm. And I love the story you told me recently about being out and about. Maybe it was on Oahu where you were wearing maybe a holoku or a holoku, and you encountered some young people that made a comment about it, and it had to do with your desire to kind of restore the Aloha Friday, Aloha attire tradition that was, it's sort of waned in these days. So if you could share that story and speak to what it means to you to maybe restore that tradition.
Well, in 1962, the Hawaiian Fashion Guild gave aloha shirts and I guess aloha dresses to people in the legislature and in the Senate and in the House in Hawaii and encouraged them to wear these garments for Fridays, on Fridays, and they were called Aloha Fridays. The
Mhm,
men seem to have adopted really well to that, but I
mhm,
know that the women have stopped wearing Hawaiian fashions on Fridays, or not stopped, but don't generally do that anymore. And I wanted to bring that back because fashion is a statement of who we are. So anyway, I was going to Oahu to congratulate one of my students who got a new position at Dole Intermediate. And my friend and I stopped at Watanabe Floral. I could buy her a lei and some flowers. And I was wearing a long vintage Alan James Hawaiian Heritage mu'umu'u holoku. And as I was going through the refrigerator, looking at leis, there were two Hawaiian guys, young guys, who were looking at me and trying to look for leis too. And finally, I said, "Oh, can I help? Can I help you?" And they find a lei too. And one of them said, "Oh, empty what? You work as one greeter." And I had to say, "Oh," and then they kind of looked at my clothes, and I said, "Oh, no, this is my Aloha Friday dress." And you, "Oh, so you're not one greeter?" And I was like, no. And I was thinking, I'm kind of too old for that. I don't think they want, a tutu lady coming up going, "Aloha, welcome to Hawaii, let me give you a lei." That's the stuff for the younger people. But
right.
it kind of saddened me because I felt, well, they're associating the Hawaiian women's garments with the tourist industry, which is valid, but I said, I think more people should be out there, women wearing these garments. But they were
And
nice guys.
mhm, sounds like it. And that brings me to something that I just thought of about in the toward the end of the book. You have a section about modern Hawaiian fashion and the resurgence of using kapa designs and sort of symbols from the culture, reinventing it. And I feel like, do you feel that that is stronger these days? That the fashion world locally is embracing some of the ideas from the past?
Yes, I think so. It started with Elsie Dawes in the 1940s doing Hawaiian prints using Hawaiian plants, native plants. And it segued into the 20th century with Zig Zane doing those beautiful, iconic native plant designs and his fabulous clothing. But now we have a resurgence of interest in all things Hawaiian with the Hawaiian Renaissance. And there are designers like Maika Kamohoali'i and, of course, Mana Ola, who are doing, and Ari South, who are designing their own fabrics. And they're going back to the tradition of kapa designs and adding their own personal touches to it. I remember Micah giving a speech about how you just can't draw triangles on a piece of paper and say you're designing a kapa.
Mm.
He mentioned that since he's from Waimea, his kapa design is inspired by the kipu'u winds, and he has some traditional uh, Hawaiian designs on in his fabrics, as well as the new ones that he has been inspired to create.
Mm. And kind of going back toward the beginning of the book, it's really so incredibly researched, and it begins. It's sort of chronological, right? Where we begin with pre-contact, the beginning, and it was fascinating to read about kapa, the process of how it was made. And then it goes into cotton, where the introduction of Western contact into the world. And as someone that identifies as sort of a feminist, uh, I'm a feminist, let's just say. Um, some of the way, how do you feel, the way that fashion was adopted from the missionaries? Initially they had a lot of opinions about the way modesty, one of being one of them. And um, do you have any personal feelings about the way that fashion was originally introduced to the Native Hawaiians?
Well, initially, when
Mm-hmm.
Kalakua boarded the Thaddeus and made friends with the missionaries and showed them her bolt of fabric and requested that they make a dress for her, sort of based on theirs, I think that was a very positive thing. And when she modeled it, when she left the ship, the Hawaiians were totally entranced because previously the Hawaiian royalty and the richer Hawaiians had been able to purchase Western fashion and fabrics from the traders and the whaling ships, but they never saw a dress that was so well suited for the climate and well suited for the women's very ample figures. However, with this good start and all the maka'ainana women saying, "Oh, I want to dress like my ali'i," out of respect, the missionaries decided that tappers or the kapapa'u was a sign of debauchery, and it was sinful to wear it. So when they were organizing their churches, they told the Hawaiian women they could not come into church to worship God if they were dressed in a pa'u. They had to be properly dressed in a holoku. And sadly, not all the Hawaiian women could afford to have a holoku. So there's a story in the missionary journals about the Hawaiian women coming to church in their holoku, smiling at the missionaries and at the entrance of the church, going to their pews, looking out the window and seeing their friends who were outside in their was gesturing. So they took off their holokus and threw them out the window. And their friends who were dressed only in the pa'u pulled over the holoku and came into church. One holoku served maybe 5 women. And when the missionaries started their services, they were horrified to see that there are lots of Hawaiian women in attendance wearing the kapa pa'u, their tappers.
Mm. And interesting. And I also read you do go into detail about lei, different forms of lei, especially the ones worn on the head, and that even that in the early days was not considered appropriate because they wanted them to cover their heads. Is that right?
Yes, the missionaries wore these bonnets that covered the back of the head as well and covered all your hair. So when they saw royal women wearing their feather headdress lei on their head, which was a symbol of royalty, they didn't understand and they kept on writing in their journals that, oh my gosh, they're still wearing those things on their heads and they should be wearing something more proper. And it was a cultural thing, but initially the women who made headway for the missionaries or the missionary wives. They were the dressmakers and they had personal contact with the queens and the chiefesses of Hawaii when they started to sew their clothes and teach them how to sew. And they actually made social contacts and established that. So that's how the male missionaries were able to meet with the ali'i and sort of have an in with the royalty.
Oh, fascinating. And you have large sections of the book that talk about Hawaiian royalty and the fashions that they adopted, after they traveled to Europe and so forth. Was there anything you'd like to share from any particular royal person. I'm most fascinated by Liliuokalani, of course, but whatever you want to speak to in terms of what you think their motivation to dress, to stay current and in whatever fashions that were on display in Europe.
Well, I'd like to talk about Kapiolani. Um, Kapiolani was asked by her husband to go to the Queen's Jubilee. That's Queen Victoria of England. And of course, Liliuokalani was to accompany her. She decided, Kapiolani, to have a whole bunch of nice gowns made to show to the people, the kings and queens of the other countries, that the Hawaiians were not savages. And some of the gowns, like the famous peacock gown, were made by B. Eltman Company in New York. Others were ordered from different sources. Some were made here. And recently, Iolani Palace started the Ali'i Garment Reproduction Project, where some of the fabulous gowns that Queen Kapiolani wore at the Jubilee celebrations were reproduced by Iris Viacusis, who's a local designer. And probably my favorite one is the black velvet dress with the beautiful four lay draped on the skirt and lay feather decorations on the bodice. The history behind that was that the lay were probably o'o. And when Iris went to research the garment at the Bishop Museum, he said, of course, the lays were all missing. And he was able to find like parts of many of the garments, because sadly, with the fall of the monarchy, a lot of the dresses of the ali'i were in gowns were auctioned off, and some of them never have found their way out of Hawaii, and some of them never returned.
Yeah, it's a bittersweet is probably not the right word, but I want to read more into the fall of the monarchy, the overthrow. Was that part of the book difficult to write, or was it? How did you incorporate, the focus of your book on fashion and how it relates or is a part of that history?
Well, I was reading an article about Richard Godwin, or Goodwin, however you wish to pronounce his name, who was the designer for Alfred Shine, one of Hawaii's iconic and original fashion designers. And Godwin had said he wanted to write a book of linking Hawaiian fashion to the history of the Hawaiian garment. And sadly, he did not live long enough to do that. And for some reason, that reading that one sentence inspired me to do this. And actually, you cannot tell the history of the garments without telling the history of Hawaii, because the development, of the garment is affected by what's going on in the environment and in Hawaii. Um, I I tried to be as fair and open as possible, but I will admit that I cried every time I edited the section on Princess Kaiulani. That I always felt that it was very, very tragic that she never got a chance to rule, and that her life was so fraught with sadness. And my editor, Martha Webb Costa, who's my best friend from when we were 7 years old, said that she felt the same way. And she said she cried a couple of times editing her blue pencil, editing the Princess Kaiulani chapters, because she was the last ali'i, and it was sad. The ali'i now are actually descendants of Queen Kapiolani, and not Kalakaua. Princess Kailani was a Kalakaua.
And kind of segueing back to the process of writing the book, I'm interested, just personally as a librarian and a book lover and a researcher, about the process of what role libraries and archives have played, not just in the writing of this book, but also in your personal and professional life when you were a teacher. Just to speak to that, I'm kind of tooting our own horn, but I just want to hear about your what it meant to you, what libraries, archives, and so forth, and books, of course, what role that played in your personal, professional, and writing life.
Well, if you look at my forehead, it says bookworm. in large black letters. When I was a young girl going to Kaunoa Elementary School, we were a small school, so we didn't have a library. So the bookmobile would come, and my friend Martha, the editor of my book, Muffy, and I were so excited. And the rule was you could only borrow 4 books. And so we were, I guess, second or third graders, and we used to quickly, select our books, sign them out, and then put them aside and look at our classmates' collections of books and ask if some of them would like to borrow a book for us and offer to buy them popsicles after school or offer all kinds of bribes. We were the ultimate bookworms. We spent a lot of time reading the Blue Fairy book, the Green Fairy book, the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, which are very grim, I must say. And we read through the Laura Ingalls Wilder series and stuff, and we were sort of ahead of our time and uh, of our maturity level, I think, because we read um, Little Women and stuff, and we didn't quite get it. And of course, Buffy read A Scarlet Letter, and we both had to look up things like, And you gotta admit, when you're in 7th grade and you live on Maui, kind of like, I wonder what this is all about. It wasn't until later that we figured out, what was going on. But we were just the books, I think, saved us, and they put us in a safe and happy place. And to this day, I don't like to read sad, scary war novels and stuff because I think I've experienced too much of that. I like the lighthearted novels and stuff. But my favorite author, and I know you're going to ask that, is Frances Hodgson Burnett.
Yes.
And as an English major, I know that most of it, an English teacher, most of you would think, the Brit Lit teacher, she likes Shakespeare. Well, of course I do. And I like Alfred Lord Tennyson. But my favorite author, beyond the shadow of a doubt, is Frances Hodgson Burnett. And I love her, A Little Princess, because the main character never gives up. She always thinks that other people, no matter how terrible her situation is, and she has this inner strength and hope that things will become better. And that's a good life lesson. I also like her book, Lord Fauntleroy. And one of the things, the lesson in that one is Fauntleroy's mother says to him when he's a little boy, I hope he will make a difference in the world. I hope there'll be some good coming from because you have lived. And I think I try to teach my students that in a more subtle way, saying that we need to make a difference, we need to be positive, and we need to help each other out on this journey.
Yeah, definitely. And as a student of yours, you had an impact. And I feel like in my own profession that I hope I do too in some way. And you definitely have had an impact. I hope there's some students, former students that might have joined us today or watch this later on, because I was like over the moon when I found out that you had completed this book, and I remembered I'm in it, but being young, and I remember the photo shoot and everything. I was so self-conscious and everything. And looking back at my photo now, I just was overcome because it was like, I look back at her and I'm like, oh, if only I could have told her some things, and and you encouraged me, but we don't always absorb that or hear that when we're at that tumultuous age, where it's like it's hard. So I really appreciate all that you've done, and on behalf of all your students and the people that you've influenced. So let's see. I'm trying to think of a good question. Oh, yes. Before we show some of the beautiful photographs from the book, I'd like to know what you hope readers will take away from reading this book.
Well, I hope that they will learn where the holoku came from and the mu'umu'u and the difference. The holoku is a garment that has sleeves. The mu'umu'u came from the chemise, and it is traditionally worn under the holoku. It was
Oh.
sleeveless and it was ankle length. The holoku was floor length. Not all of the holoku had trains, and sometimes now these days the terms are interchangeable. But remember, mu'umu'u in the Hawaiian language means named or cut off, to be maimed or cut off. So the sleeves on the garment are non-existent. And technically, the one I'm wearing is actually a muumuu because it has no sleeves, even though it is full length.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm hoping that the book will inspire people to dress in the traditional holoku'u or mu'umu'u and or whatever um, fashionable Hawaiian garments they find. When I had a chance to speak to Manaola and Kamohoali'i, I told them that if they would design clothing that could be worn at work rather than the fancy getty strap dresses that could be worn that are worn at special occasions, that I think they would be tapping a really big market because I'm hoping that a lot of women will be dressing on Aloha Friday or every day of the week in something Hawaiian.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So, may I share some of the photos from the book? I can.
Yeah, make a comment.
Yes.
I
Mm-hmm.
say I got wonderful help with the photos. Eugene Tanner was my initial photographer, and
Mm-hmm.
the second photographer who did the modern part of the book was Ricky Shimomura of Nagamine, and they were the most accommodating and helpful people. And I am eternally grateful to them for their contribution to the book. Without
Wonderful.
them, um,
They
didn't.
are exquisite photos. And before we go to the video, we do have a question. Agnes, do you have a favorite designer and where do you find your dresses these days?
Well, I would say my favorite designer is Betty Manchester of Betty
Mm-hmm.
because I love the old-fashioned old-fashioned style garments that she designed, and she did her research at Bishop Museum, and one of the her designs is based on her grandfather's nightshirt, and it
Oh,
has the pleats and the ruffles and stuff that a man's nightshirt, and even the kind of hem on the bottom that is a U shape. And she said her grandfather used to wear those garments and nightshirts, and she was inspired to make it into a woman's garment. She also designed a holoku, a special one with a train for Queen Elizabeth II when she came to Hawaii, and for Jackie Kennedy.
wow.
So she was quite a designer. I also like Mamo Howell for her beautiful kappa print fabric. And of course, Princess Kaiulani for the lace. And this is a Princess Kaiulani.
Oh, beautiful. All right, so we're going to show a video with the different photographs from the book. So let's do
Thank you.
that. Mm-hmm.
Oh, should I be doing a commentary?
If you'd like to.
Okay, this is an Alan Aquina. This is Palaka, a Palaka print that was made popular by the plantation workers and the sailors. This is my favorite holoku. And this is a Princess Kailani garment altered. Um, this print shows the crown flower. This one is a piece, two, oops, by Malia. This one is Elsie Crassus. This holoku has large birds of paradise, and notice the circular train. This one is an Iolani. This one is a Kiyomi, and I love the regalness of it. This one is an Ari South, and this is iconic Alfred Shaheen. This one is a Princess Kailani. Notice the beautiful neckline. And another Palaka top. This is by Ari South. This is Manaola, and I wanted to show his famous designs. This is a equestrian influenced mu'umu'u by holoku, excuse me, by Princess Kailani. This is Elsie Crassus. This one is a bathing suit with a metal zipper. And here we have a modern holoku modeled by Sissy Lake Farm. And this is another Manaola. And this is his traditional piahi. This is the Matson calendar, menu inspired fabric. This is a babakea. And this one is a nakeu avai. Sissy is related to nakeu avai. This is also a Manaola. When she turns, you can see that it's very suggestive in the back. This is a traditional sarong dress. And this is a holoku with a ruffle that it could be used as a lei. And oddly enough, that one came from the mainland.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was so beautiful. Let's see. And is there anything else that you would, before we go to questions, that you would like to add about, I'm trying to think if there's any, I'm still reading through it because it's a lot of information, but just the gorgeous photographs that you got from the archives. You do have a story about having to purchase negatives from the archive in order to print.
Oh yes, I was hanging out at the archives, state archives, looking through all their collections. This is before they were online, so this was like maybe 10 years ago, 12 years ago. And I selected some photos of Princess Ruth, who was one of my favorite people. And when I approached the desk, they said, oh, well, we don't have any negatives for those photographs that you want of Princess Ruth. If you wish to have them, you're going to have to pay for the negatives. And I said, oh, okay. And it was like $80 or something because they were taking the negatives off of glass plates. So fast forward a couple of months, I get a call. Oh, we got your photos of Princess Ruth. So I flew to Oahu. Those days it was affordable to fly. And I showed up at the archives and they gave me the 2 photos. And I said, well, what about the negatives? Didn't I pay for them? And they said, yes. I said, do I get the negatives? And they said, no, they now belong to the archives and for anybody else who wants those photos of Princess Ruth. So I was like, okay, long live Princess Ruth.
I know. You did future researchers a favor, I guess, huh? To have that archive. Is this the one that you're talking about, Princess Ruth?
This one is a very common one.
Oh, okay. So it's a different one.
Yeah. And she is she's a very, very proud woman and loved all things Hawaiian, refused to speak English, though she did understand English. But one thing about the Western culture that she embraced were Western fashions. And she had the most fancily decorated fringe, lace, braided beaded Western clothing that you could ever see, but including some very fancy corsets and undergarments made especially for her. But she just loved Western fashion. She has
Oh,
probably the best dress of some of the
yeah.
women of the time. A very proud lady.
And we have another question. How do you describe the process of writing this book, and will you be writing more books?
Well, first of all, I'm going to be 74 in October, and I do not see spending another 20 years of my life trying to write and research and write another book. But it was a long process. I was working as an English teacher, taking home 57 research papers to grade, and doing tests and teaching British Lit. So I didn't have the benefit of lots of time. So every Saturday I would go to MCC library and hang out in my favorite cubicle and handwrite notes and rewrite sections. I
Mhm,
actually wrote the book by hand and then would put it on the computer, and it was
mhm.
a very long process. And I don't think I'm going to live long enough to do a second book. So I'm inviting everybody else to please do another book on this, maybe on the designers of Hawaii, or you're a special designer, your favorite
Mhm.
designer. You can always branch off and find other topics related to
Mhm.
this.
We have another question from Kelsey. She says, nice pictures on the slideshow. Can you say again who your photographers were?
My photographer for the particular slideshow was
Mhm.
Ricky Shimomura. He is with Nagamini Photo Studio, and he
Mhm.
went on site to do the photographs of the women. And I wanted to kind of comment about Ricky. Very professional, beautiful job. He also did my portrait, which is found on the jacket of the book. And I highly recommend him. Very patient and very creative.
Nice. And Sue Werner says, hi, Agnes, this is fascinating. I wonder what you think of commercial outlets like Sears selling Hawaiian clothing in the 60s and 70s.
Well, I think that was a good way of, I guess, getting the Hawaiian clothing out to the general public. Sears did a good job. There was Liberty House, there's Andrade's, and McInerney's, and there were little private stores owned by Watermol's, like Watermol's and Leilani Gift Shop, which Watermol's owned. And sadly, Watermol's finally closed. They closed at Ala Moana recently. They were one of the original purveyors of Hawaiian women's fashions. And I think it's a wonderful way that some of these designers sold their designs exclusively to different department stores and had their stuff like Carol and Mary and
Mhm.
sold there. More recently, the designers are doing their stuff online, or they're selling exclusively in shops like Zig Zane, their own shop, and Manaola has
Mhm.
his own shop. I think Ari South as well.
Okay, wonderful. And let's see. So again, if anyone wants to type questions in, we have a few more minutes. And I guess nobody heard the music in that slideshow. That's my bad. It's beautiful music. Can you tell us again? I could try to share it with the sound, but it was such a beautiful song. Who was the artist that?
The music that was accompanying the slideshow was written and sung by my Kumuhula Kamaka Kukona. And if you can, if you can play it, it would might be nice.
I'm so sorry. I can try that again, and I'll keep an eye out for any questions. Let's see. I'll try again with the sound. Because we have a few minutes left. Okay,
Yes,
now I think I got it. Share sound. Okay, so let's do it again. Okay, now we'll start from the beginning.
this is a tutu isitoa.
Au he wale o he ke aloha lai lei ala anu he a sweet Puarose lai Ivili ia me kamaile Kaluhea Auhea wale oe He ke aloha lai Lei ala anu hea sweet Puarose lai Ivili ia me kamaile Kaluhea Ku'ulei ala anu hea Sweet ke honi ka ihu E alava mai oe He ku'ui polai I ka poli ha mama o ka halawai lai Ai ano ka wai ka he Mali He alava mai oe He ku'ui polai I ka poli ha mama o ka halawai lai Ai ano ka wai ka he Mali Ku'ulei ala anu hea Sui ke honi ka ihu Hie mauno I ku'umakalai Kulai e kaluna Pu'ukuilai Uluwehi kalauliko Lehua Hie mauno I ku'umakalai Kumai e kaluna Pu'ukuilai Uluwehi kalauliko Lehua Ku'ulei ala anu hea Sui ke honi ka ihu Uana tuwehi no e ke aloha lai Lei ala anu hea sweet Puarose lai Haina ia mai ana Kapuana Puana juvehi no HG lai Lei ala anu hea sweet Puarose lai Haina ia mai ana Kapuana Kulei ala anu hea Sui ke honi ka ihu Kulei ala anu hea
So beautiful. I'm glad did everybody hear that? I hope this time. Let's see. I'm going to see if there's more questions. Oh, yes. There's a question about how many models did you use? And you kind of answered this earlier, but how did you find them all?
Well, they were friends, family, faculty, and staff from Maui High and Baldwin, and my former students, and some of my Hoopa sisters. And that's how I found them. And I think we were going to do a page with the models' names, but I got confused about who some people were because I think the picture of you was when you were a senior in high school.
Mhm.
And I couldn't identify the models release forms with some of the photos anymore. And so
Mm,
you could not list the models. I think there were like 47 models.
wow. Awesome. And Jane Tesoro says, great job, Agnes. When will your display at Bailey House be open for public viewing?
It's been up since March, and so far the clothing is in good shape on the mannequins. We're hoping that they'll open up in September, and it'll
Mhm.
be running until December. But I'm going to change out the garments in October or November,
Mhm.
so there'll be a fresh supply of mholoku and mu'umu'u at the Bailey House, and the book will be sold there as well.
And who designed the book and how long did that take?
Stacy Leong designed the book. Stacy Leong was actually a former student of mine as well,
Mhm.
and it took. She's a graphic artist and a designer in Honolulu,
Mhm.
and it took about a year for her to do that because she had many other projects. She did all the census videos that you see on television, and she had I guess numerous other projects on the fire. So it took a little bit longer than I expected, but nevertheless, it got finished, and I am really really pleased with how beautiful it turned out.
Yeah,
And I
it's
thank
gorgeous. Mhm.
Balani Tanehi for loaning her kappa patterns. She's a famous kappa maker. And Dino Moro of Hilo, who's a professional photographer for some of his photographs of the Merry Monarch and people in the book.
Beautiful. Well, we're almost at the 11 o'clock mark. So I just want to say thank you so much, Agnes, for talking with us today. We will have more author talks this month, so check the Hawaii State Public Library System Facebook page for future events. And it's not too late to join the summer reading program. You have until the end of August to sign up through our website, librarieshawaii.org, and you can learn more details there. And in closing, I just so appreciate you as a person and now as an author. And I know you mean a lot to a lot of people. So, is there anything you'd like to say in closing?
Well, I'd like to thank everybody. And you know, the lesson that Stacy said that I taught was her, or that she took away, was that you never do anything half-ass. So I
Mhm.
was like, during this whole thing, I really wanted to do the book correctly and properly and to the best of my ability.
Mhm.
And I apologize for any mistakes that may have occurred in my research or my writing, but I did the best I could have possibly. I tried really, really, really hard. And I thank everybody for their support and help with the book.
Mahalo, Agnes.
Mahalo.